What is your cadence for self-observation? Now, you know what a cadence is. It's kind of like a rhythm or how far apart things are spread. You know, that's one cadence. How about this one? There's another one. How about this one? That's another one. How far we space things out, right? Well, this is a big deal, guys. If you're doing something that matters, like let's say flying an airplane, you might want ongoing self-observation, because to not know what you're doing can cause you to crash, right? Flying an airplane, observation is going on all the time. Your altimeter, your speed, your fuel, your direction, your ascension or descension, all of that is happening all the time. And if something changes, it could hurt you or needs to be improved upon, your instrument panel tells you very quickly. Now, there's other things that can't be usually as destructive if something goes wrong. How often do you go check on the oak tree in your backyard? Probably not as often as the pilot's checking on the altitude or the speed or the fuel. But you need to look at it every now and then, because maybe one of those limbs up there has got a little crack in it, and the wind blows hard enough, it's going to end up crashing on your roof. So pretty much everything, pretty much in life that is at least alive or subject to forces like weather and things like that, it needs some sort of cadence of observation. Now that I'm approaching my 29th birthday, they tell me I got to go have certain kinds of exams every however long. Some of those are not fun. As some of you are approaching your 29th birthday, know that as well. And there are other things that there's a different cadence. If you talk to your dentist, and now they know the dental picture should never have been separated from the rest of medicine. It is part of your body, right? That you should be having regular cleanings and all of that kind of stuff, because it can end up with heart problems and all sorts of other problems. You better go in there every however long they tell you to do it. I'm not a dentist. But a lot of times in the area that I am a doctor of, which is all the stuff we call, psychological world, which basically is three big areas. The clinical area, how you're feeling with your stress and your anxiety, or do you have peace and joy and happiness and thriving? Or depression and anxiety and maybe addictions or pseudo addictions, or low energy or sleeplessness or worry or rumination. That clinical picture that needs some observation. The relational picture, the checkup on your relationships, getting above them and saying, how's it going? One of the big areas where I do a lot of work in is with CEOs of really, really, really big companies and organizations. And the highest performers, we do checkups on them. They call me in to do the checkup, and we do a teeth cleaning. And we get feedback from all of their direct reports and from the whole company. And sometimes things surface that need to be addressed. So it's in our work, in our performance, and in our relationships, and pretty much every area of life, we need this. Now, here's what I notice. This is no coincidence, that the healthiest, highest performing people do ongoing, significant self-observation. The people that I work with and the people that I know, they have instrument panels in life, just like the pilot does, that are constantly observing how they're doing. Okay. So I want to ask you, what's your cadence? How often? And the method of self observation. And we can build these in a lot of different ways. I'm not going to prescribe any particular one to you because, we have different kinds of needs, different kinds of seasons. In the beginning of COVID, the companies that I work with, the CEOs that I work with, the best ones and the best companies, all of a sudden they changed the cadence and they had a 1 hour or 2 hour, the CEOs with their direct reports, phone call every single morning in the beginning of COVID, every morning. And they would start it out by taking the first 15 minutes and checking in. How are you feeling? Did you sleep? What are you worried about? What's going on at home? And building that team and that solidarity to knowing and having a pulse read on where everybody was in this crisis. And then talk about their people and their departments and how they're doing. And then talk about where the work is and what needs to be fixed and what's falling apart today and what's crashing and burning and all of that kind of stuff. And they did it every single day because it's in crisis. Well, sometimes we're not in crisis. We don't need it every day. If you're in ICU, they monitor you around the clock. If you're healthy, you go in every year for your physical. So I don't know the cadence for you, but I do know the areas that it'd be good to look at. I want you to look at the clinical arena and how often and what ways you stop and ask, how am I doing? Is my energy level where I need it to be? Is my concentration where I need it to be? Is my mind free to use? How much freed up disk space is there? If you ever had a computer that's so crowded with everything, you try to type, it lags and it doesn't have enough RAM in there to do its work. Well, sometimes you got so much stress and so much rumination and so much worry going on, you don't have enough free to use mental space where you can think. That's a sign of depression. It's a sign of anxiety. It's a sign of a bunch of stuff. But I want you observing your mental status. That's what psychologists call it, a mental status exam. How's your judgment? Are you making goofy decisions? Are you starting to get a negative output or outlook? So just, what is that cadence? What's that cadence? And number one, what are your instruments? Some of it is we sit down on a rock or a stump out in the woods and have a moment of silence and say, how am I doing? And I always, and I hope you do, ask God, how am I doing? And listen for what he says. So that's part of the instrument panel. The other instrument panel are the people that are close to you. One of the things that I would do regularly with my kids when they were home was they were a good instrument panel for me. And I'd sit down and say, so how am I doing? How am I doing as a dad? What am I doing you like? What am I doing you don't like? What do you want me to do that I'm not doing? What do you want me to stop doing that I am doing? Where do I suck and where am I performing well? What am I missing? How am I meeting your needs? How am I making you crazy? All that kind of stuff. And then with Tori, same thing, how are we doing? Sometimes not sometimes, regularly, we do it around the table as a family. And then the people you work with, you checking in, how are we doing? Having regular cadence of, just getting feedback on that performance. And then I would hope you got somebody speaking into your life, therapists, life coaches that you pay for. One of my favorite verses, and I say verses, there are several of them that say this, like Proverbs says, sell everything you have to go buy wisdom. We need people speaking into our lives, and sometimes we have to pay for that. But also, there are free versions of a lot of wisdom around all of us. Some people say, well, I can't afford to get a life coach or get, whatever. I go, well, fine. Join a group, put a group together, go through a workbook together with some really balanced people that can give feedback to each other and form a support group. I kind of worry about anybody who doesn't have a regular support group. I don't kind of worry about it. I really worry about it. We should have that. One of my favorite verses says, don't forsake the regular coming together, gathering together, and spurring one another on to good deeds and good things, motivating each other, pushing each other. So, 3 areas: clinically, how you're doing, how you're feeling, mental health, kind of depression, anxiety, stress, all that kind of stuff. Relationally, how are your important relationships doing? And performance, are you reaching your goals? Do you have goals? Have you set your goals? Do you know what your strengths are? Do you know what your talents are? Do you know what you want your life to look like 10 years from now? I just went through a whole new process of this myself. Um, it's a great question in the midst of when I was doing that. And I've been doing that anyway, but as one of the phrases I use in Leadership University is about having a vision is it's a desired future state. Desired future state. And that's a vision. What does it look like in the future that you desire? And I was sitting down with a good friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I hadn't seen him in a while. I said, so what's Henry's desired future state 10 years from now? Well, funny you ask, because I've been kind of looking at that. So where are you doing that? Where are you doing that? Cadence, regular checkups. How often do you review your goals? How often do you review the activities that you got to be doing to reach your goals? Do you have a financial counselor, for example? And one of the most important things that we can do, because so much of life involves finances, right? Worry and stress and marital conflict and kids and education and being able to, meet our needs. What's your cadence of financial checkups? Just like a doctor. Everybody that I know that's, financially grounded and secure in life, and I don't mean extremely wealthy, although it includes the extremely wealthy. You always see it with wealthy people. They've been very diligent about financial advice, even when they didn't have any. This is why all of the big houses, if you look at the big Wall Street firms, what do? They really, really, really go after 23-year-olds. They go, I don't have any money to manage. Exactly. That's why we need to start managing it, right? So it grows into something. So wherever you are on that spectrum, to have a counselor that sits down, the 2 simplest questions to begin with: are you spending more than you got coming in? Well, that means you're leaking water. We got to stop that. And number 2, do you have a budget? Some people, I don't have enough money to have a budget. Oh, yes, you do. Okay. And some people say, well, I got enough. I don't really need a budget. Oh, yes, you do. A budget basically tells every dollar where to go and what to do. Because if you're telling, as Dave Ramsey says, if you're telling every dollar what its job is, then you're in charge. See, that's a cadence of self-observation. And it is amazing the difference in that area, in health, in your teeth, in your other body parts, in stress, all of that. It's amazing what observation does. And let me leave you with this: the very act of self-observation gets us to a higher level of our brain, which also begins to work on self-regulation. Everybody knows this from the research. Whatever you measure, it starts to change just by measuring it. Just by measuring it. Count your calories. You'll see what happens. Self-observation. What's your cadence? All righty.